Today I'm in the woods with Ophelia, and we're in a oak mountain laurel land, coastal Connecticut, or a coastal Connecticut forest. Maybe 10 miles inland, probably not even. We got red oaks, maybe a few whites, and mainly mountain laurel. Significantly less snow down here, probably like half an inch, if that. But we'll see what we find. We got the Oak-kalmia, latifolia, Quercus rubra, typical New England forest. So now we're in this little power line, and power lines recreate little grassland habitats. We have Lespedeza here, or slender bush clover, or hairy bush clover, one of the Lespedezas. We have little blue stem, Schizachyrium, and over here we have some andropogon, which is, let me find it, a much taller grass. These tall grasses here, this is the andropogon, right here, andropogon. And then we get Anaphyllus right here, and then there's all sorts of solidago, usually puberula or puberula, and wrinkle-leaved goldenrod or rugosa, but this is solidago puberula or puberula. I don't know. We got Comptia, the sweet fern, beautiful sweet fern. We got some mountain laurel. Those don't really matter. And there's mugwort coming up, Artemisia vulgaris right here. And then you got grass-leaved goldenrod or Euthymia, one of my favorites. These you do not find in any nursery, so when I see them, I collect a little bit of seed from each population. One of my favorite habitats. I did grab some goldenrods from up here over the summer, or the last spring, to see what they did. And they're absolutely beautiful and stunning. And this area occasionally gets mowed. We have this patch of mugwort here. So I decided I wanted to save them. We got more Schizachyrium. These are native ecotype because they tried to seed it with some other crap, or a lot of the stuff they do bring in, like the fill, is absolutely laced with invasives. Like in this area alone, we got the mugwort. I mean, this isn't invasive, this is a grape. You got sumacs here, probably shining sumacs, but they also could be staghorn. I think they're shining. I'll collect some seed from these because these are good natives. But it was also filled with mugwort, so this probably came from the landfill, honestly, because I've seen a very similar species makeup compared to the landfills around here. We got a big patch of rubus, probably Allegheny blackberry or Himalayan blackberry, but it is a large shrubby rubus, and I'm just going to go with Rubus allegensis. But and then we got this one might be, yeah, it's a sumac. This is a young staghorn sumac. We got the fucking Artemisia. That's the worst one. That one takes over everywhere. Little oaks. There she is. She'll come back. She stays relatively close. She only goes on the path, which is good. And I only take her out during the winter because there really isn't much out. If I took her out in the summer, she'd be womping all sorts of stuff. I once took her out in the spring and I was in the swamp. This is before I knew much about botany, and so I'm trying to look at all these cool plants. I'm trying to take a picture of them, and she freaking stomps him. Like, I'm like down on my knee, steadying it, and she just like, she squashed it, and I was very sad. It was a very disappointing time. Up here maybe has like an inch. It froze, so it's pretty solid. This is good skiing type of stuff. Here we have a bunch of marcescent oaks. This is a forest I pretty much grew up in, so I basically watched it. I've been seeing this forest for about 10 years now. And so 10 years ago, I took one of my first hikes back here, and this area was a beautiful oak forest, extremely thick, tons of mountain laurel. It was just like the rest of it. And it was just a giant expanse of oak forest. And so a few years ago, they did what they call bunny management, where they'll clear cut and log an entire section of forest and let it grow up as young forest, which is habitat for cottontails and whatnot. So it adds diversity. I used to be against it, but now I'm like, all right, as long as you keep out the invasives. But a lot of places that do this sort of stuff, they don't care about the invasives. I have a feeling they just logged it to get the wood, you know, free money more or less. Like, oh yeah, we'll call it bunny management so we can harvest this piece of land and never touch it. I mean, it's just kind of like you clear parts forest, you're going to get more rabbits because there's more herbaceous cover. Everything's smaller, it's more open. Rather than this deep forest, which is more meant for birds and deer. Cottontails need more herbaceous cover, and this provides more herbaceous cover. A lot more food for the rabbits. So, 10 years ago, this was forest, and then a year later it was completely cleared, and they all used to have like an amazing view through here. All these oaks are they're between 5 and 10 years growth, if not younger. And it goes back down here. But anyways, it's way bigger now, and I watched it kind of grow, which is really cool. Here we have a nice leucobirum moss growing against this oak. These are more typical dryland species, so this is like an oak upland. Usually you find leucobirum in association with white pine, and there you have it. So here we have a white oak, Quercus alba. This is a sapling, and you can tell the difference from a Quercus rubra in this kind of sapling marcescence phase by looking over at this one here, which is a red oak. And red oaks, if you take that leaf, it's a lot darker, it's a lot more red, and I guess in the frame of oaks, this one's the whiter one. So you're just like, oh, that's a white oak because it's light. I'd say it's more like a pink oak compared to this. Because this is a red oak, or it's a hybrid with black oak. Because all the red oaks around here actively hybridize. I swear it. There is so much diversity in oak leaf shape and size and color and texture. It's ridiculous. And they're all pointy edges, like the red oaks usually are. Whereas white oak is white oak, man. Like, if it looks like a white oak, it's probably a white oak. Calicladium imponens, the brocade moss, or hypnum moss. It used to be in the genus Hypnum, but they took it out, and now it's Calicladium. Here we have a sassafras albidium. I think that's what it's called, but it's the sassafras. It's the only tree around here that's called sassafras, with its mitten and other shaped leaves. But I can just tell by its growth form and how it's losing all these ones at the bottom because it's not shade tolerant. So these usually end up dying, especially when they're in the shade. And towards the top you can see it's barely greenish. So that's another dead giveaway for sassafras. And like this kind of vertical, ridgy, not dark bark like an oak would if it was at this size. Got a Betualenta here. These are super obvious when young. They're just gray or black birch. You know, you can just tell by looking at it. And it's mostly black birch over here. Like in the shade, the forest came back as black birch. In the sun, it came back mostly as oak. There's your oak bark for you. It's like not as green. It's like this. How would you describe that? A silvery gray. Let me get a closer look so it focuses. Yeah, it's like a silvery gray. They have nice young bark. And they just look a certain way, you know. I can't quite describe it. Like basically, young red oak bark is basically tiny red oak bark. You know, this is what the small one. It's basically a miniature version of that, and it has the same colors and nearly the same texture. That's what I'm trying to get at. Baptisia tinctoria with its yellow flowers, and then the pea family. Can't forget to mention that. So it's a little legume. And I collect the seeds from these ones too. Just a couple. Because I really, when I go for a hike, I might take the seeds only from one plant. And the rest I don't touch. Oh, it says go this way. It's too bad. That used to be a nice trail. Now we're walking through a pretty young forest. Less than 10 years old. And they decided to not maintain this trail. And they blocked it off for some reason. It's like a midway connector. And I feel like it's important because it keeps at least one area of this a little bit more open for grassland species. Like I would have had a wide path running through here. Because wide paths, like another path going that way too. Like, I like having, you know, a variety of paths to kind of just meander and take pictures about. Because these areas are usually inaccessible, you know, by hiking. You can't really hike through it. It's miserable. But having a trail through it, you still get to see what kind of species occur in the gaps. Because that's where the diversity in those areas is, in the gaps. This is the type of trail that they should have had towards the middle. Because having this much open just gives you so many plants. Just, you know, you somewhat cut it every now and then. Get you so many more plants. Because it's a lot more open. If only that area was like that, but now it's getting grown in, and there's nothing worse than walking through a grown-in trail. Anyways, I remember 10 years ago, or maybe it was more like 8 or 9, I remember visiting this rock on the trail, and this giant glacier erratic was overlooking this completely forested valley. Completely forested with big mountain laurels. It was like such a majestic place, and then this is all cleared like the following year. I think this was all cut in probably 2016. And that's kind of where the grassland is. Now we're in a remnant beech hemlock forest in a tiny little ravine. We have a few hemlocks. Most of the hemlocks in this area were wiped out by the adelgid already. But a few survive here and there, especially in the nooks. They get this big old ledge with the I think it's Polypodium virginianum and Umbellularia manulata. And right here we have Yerbia divaritica, a whitewood aster. There's your Umbellularia. There's your rock Polypodium, your Oak-kalmias. This one's your hemlock, your Tsuga. I don't think I've ever been in this location, which is crazy. For being my home forest, I have not explored it a whole hell of a lot. You also got your Diopterus marginalis, your marginal wood ferns here, growing up on this cliff, or this ledge, beautifully green with the moss, and just showing out compared to the rest of the landscape that's just brown and white. I love it. Here we have a couple large glacial erratic boulders covered with Eulata crispa, Eulata moss, genus Eulata, and these are like a tiny, either atrichum or polytrichum. And you got a few different lichens on there too. I just love that color. That's beautiful. This is how most of the forest here used to look like. Ancient mountain laurel forest. The oaks here and the mountain laurels here are likely over 100 years old. And they're relatively undiverse. Not too many species. A lot of species of fungi and beetle and insect, just kind of species poor when it comes to plants. Because you get pretty much a very small handful. And majority of it, probably 90% of the plant makeup is Oak-kalmia latifolia like this one here and all the other ones around me, and Quercus rubra, like this. Red oak forest, red oak mountain laurel forest. But you do get some diversity in here. Like right here, we have a witch hazel, Hamamelis virginiana. Those appear sometimes, but those are very minor. Like mountain laurel, I'd say it's like 80% to 95%. Red oak, I'd say it's about 85%. You'll get a few small maples and a few birches and a couple other trees trying to poke in, but really, other than that, it's red oak and mountain laurel. And maybe you get some hay-scented fern and a few other heath shrubs out in the openings. Here's a foundation of a old cabin from colonial times. And this is what's left of it. It's the basement. Beautiful. Hundreds of hours to make this. Maybe not 100. You gotta dig out the pit. Usually they set it up on a large, or around a large rock, and then they just kind of build into it. Oh, that's cool. And that was the entrance to the basement. And then the rest of it was built out of wood. And the wood is all rotted away. And I'm sure this center thing was where the chimney was. And it's fallen over the years. Hundreds of years old. And I think people have been fucking with it, because this might be new. But that also might be like a garden wall, you know, as an extension of the building. Perhaps even just another room. And it's caved in? Who knows? Old foundations, though. This used to be a farm and an open, cleared pasture land. Can you imagine that? This used to be a wide, open, clear for miles. You could see clouds. You could see the horizon from here. Which you definitely can't see the horizon from here now. You got a cliff out that way, and that's kind of like the highlands. And so this is always a shadier farm. Another little hill out that way. "100-year-old forest." Probably around 70 to 80 feet tall on average, maybe a little bit taller. Some of them might only be 60 feet like this birch. 60 to 80 feet. Average width of the largest tree, or average large tree, is probably 2 feet. Once they reach 3 feet, you know the real giants. Yeah, it's about 2 feet right there. And these are shade-grown trees, and they're already half a foot, a little bit more than that. Now look, there's some Fruliana, New York scale moss, or scalewort. Next hike I'll have to go to someplace out in Rhode Island to show you what a Rhode Island oak forest looks like as compared to a Connecticut one. Because Connecticut ones always seem to be taller, and the mountain laurels in Connecticut ones seem to be a lot shorter, whereas the ones in Connecticut are huge. But other parts of Rhode Island also have huge ones. What I'm talking about is like southern Rhode Island in the same kind of general latitude, I guess, if you're just going a straight line about 10 miles inland. Similar habitat, but it's just has a different structure, much different structure. Beautiful Hedwigia ciliata. I love this moss, and it always looks fantastic in the cold, especially like a wet cold like this one. Gorgeous. Here we have a nice snow-covered Chimaphila maculata. The most common thing. I swear I see this in every forest I go to. Beautiful. And all I'm doing here is I'm just raising the brightness so you can see it, but it is somewhat, it's really close to how it looks in real life. It's nearly blue. It's probably more like that. Not like that though. It's not that dark. Here we have Denstadia punctioloba, or the hay-scented fern. These are bright green in the summer, but this is just how they look in the winter. You know, there isn't really much to explain after that, but this is a hay-scented fern. You can tell it is so obvious when it comes to ferns, like when they're dead. Like, I would have to show you when they're living so you could see, but honestly, like the hay-scented fern, if these don't shrink incrementally as they get down, it's not a New York fern. And this is one of the more common ferns. It looks nothing like bracken fern. Cinnamon fern does a whole different thing when it dies. Phagopteris completely disappears. Maidenhair fern, it's only in rich areas and it's rare, and you can tell what it is by just seeing it. So this is like the only other fern it could be. It's hay-scented fern. There's only a handful of them that grow common around here, and this one being one of the most common. Oh, and you can't forget about Vaccinium angustifolium, the lowbush blueberry. Another very obvious one. It's small, and it has usually bright green stems or bright red stems, which I think the bright green and bright red are different species. But they could also be actively hybridizing, and it's just genetic variation. They all kind of have this kind of shorty form, though. And this right here is actually a tiny little rhododendron viscosum, or pinkster flower, so there's got to be a bigger pinkster flower nearby. So over here, this used to all be thick mountain laurels, and there used to be a bunch of red cedar trees in here, and they chopped them all down. Now it's going to be kind of meadowy, but also very mugworty, because there's a lot of mugwort here, which is a little bit sad. There used to be like a nice wetland right here, and it had all sorts of orchids in it. It's just the way it goes, though. More orchids, probably more wetland plants, but they also got Phragmites right there, which is just awful. It was brought in by the contractors. There's no other way it got here, just like the mugwort and the foxtail grass. So it is what it is. I think the natives will eventually win out, or you'll just get a giant patch of invasives that slowly spreads. All it needs is just a little bit of management. Like, you cut that back for a couple years, the natives will fill in the rest of the space, and you just keep on cutting it back. Preferentially leaving the natives, like the blue stems and the andropogon, on the outside, maybe a little bit of solidago, and you just continue to clear the mugwort, let that stuff seed in, and eventually you'll get rid of like 98% of the mugwort. You always have mugwort, unless you come in and spray it all and physically remove it. You're likely never going to get rid of it. So the best thing to do is be proactive and not actively spread it like these guys are. It's a Achillea milfolium, yarrow, epic. Here we have Smilex rotundifolia, very common plant in the lily family, and it's spiky and it sucks to walk through. And then we got this is a Heraceium right here. Probably panicled hawkweed. Heraceium paniculatum, I believe. Here's an example of what a 200-year-old tree looks like. If not 250-year-old. Large white oak. Likely a pasture oak. Without a doubt, a pasture oak. See these lower branches. And probably 3.5 feet or more around. There's my hand next to that notch right there. So, yeah, nearly 4 feet around, 3.5 feet at least. Probably around 80 feet tall again. But look at that stump. It's a big boy right there. Look at him. Very nice. Here we have a lovely Ilex opaca, or the American holly. Gorgeous, and as ever, and as always will ever be. And it's up and coming here in southern New England. This one's going to be common soon. They're only common towards the coast of Rhode Island and into southeastern Massachusetts. So relatively uncommon in Connecticut, and I think that's going to be changing. Beautiful. One of my favorites.